Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me today, we're a day late than usual, but it's for a very good reason. We have a very special episode coming to you today. Rufus Peabody joining me from his panic room in New York City, and for the first time on the pod, welcome on in to the pod and to Unabated, Justin Phan. Justin, it is great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here, guys. Been a minute, and glad to get on the pod with you guys and talk a little NBA.
That's right. We're going to be talking some NBA prop projections this week because if you haven't heard already, Unabated is launching a brand new NBA product for the season. We are very excited about it. And Justin, you are going to be heading it up and heading up our news department for NBA. And people might know you from some of your previous work in the NBA news area. Is that right?
Yeah, I hope that between Fantasy Labs NBA and Underdog NBA, I've interrupted many dinner date and been responsible for a lot of tension between relationships and wondering why they're checking their phone religiously and getting all these random push alerts between the hours of 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern.
I'll tell you, I was one of those people that had the underdog notifications on for the longest time. And then finally, there was a day where I was like, my phone's blowing up too much. I can't do it anymore. I got to check them manually.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid complaint that we've gotten, and I think that's something we're gonna be looking to address a little bit here at Unabated, where the whole point of our push alerts are gonna be when you are on that dinner date at 8 Eastern and you are picking up your phone, getting an unabated notification, most of the time it should be actionable. You're not gonna get some alert on a ninth man being inactive on an alert that you're picking up your phone and you're putting it right back down. Like, why did I just get alert on this in the middle of the night? So, yeah, excited to kind of continue to hone in on news and the evolution of it and how it's really changed over the last couple of years and bring that to unabated.
Now,
What we need is a semi do not disturb mode, right? Where you're like, I'm on a date. I want to be notified if it's actually really urgent, but
Right.
not. And if you're not on a date, you want to be notified all the time.
Exactly. You're just sitting there on your couch. Just give me a reason to get distracted right now. Give me
exactly. We need to classify it by player type. Like I personally need nonstop Zaza Pachulia updates, but don't really need to know about like six men like LeBron James.
more.
Now, Rufus, when it comes to what we're going to be doing here at Unabated, a big part of this is that we are going to be marrying the up to the minute really important in especially in NBA news and lineup information with the math that we have already done here when it comes to building projections. Now, when it comes to combining the two together, give us a little background about what this is going to look like for people.
Well, so the math, I mean, the math that I'm responsible for is more of the derivatives and the trading tools. But I would say, and so Justin, I think, can really say a lot more about the projection side. But
Mhm.
I mean, I think clearly being able to project out usage is so important, and I think, and I guess I can speak more from my experience with the NFL props,
Yeah.
and just knowing a player's role is so important, and so you could have a guy that is normally in a certain role, but because of a certain injury, he steps into a different role, and you're going to expect him to be used differently, and so a lot of his stats before aren't going to necessarily translate in the way you might expect just based on a strict model. So I think that's always the challenge with and I think prop projections for I would say basically any sport besides maybe baseball because baseball is basically an individual sport masked as a team sport. You it's not like the context of at bats changes. Um, Although lineup position impacts it. So I think it's a huge challenge to be able to keep up with all these with all these things because as I said, you can build a model that is right. It's fit properly, but there's going to be huge exceptions to it because of players and the context they're playing in.
Now, Justin, why is it that the NBA is so reliant on player availability? Because I think you both can agree a huge part of your edge when betting this sport can come from the fact that you simply are faster than anybody else when it comes to knowing who's in and who's out for the night.
Yeah, I equate the NBA to 6 to 7 months of 1 day sprints. Like every slate is completely different than the other. On any day, the composition of a team can be completely thrown off with a random player being ruled out or resting due to load management. So it's always a different puzzle to solve on each day. And kind of speaking to what you just talked about with how the news impacts the projections, especially, just to start out the season, we're keeping an eye on every single player in terms of are they 100% heading into the season? Are they going to be limited? So we want to be able to capture any fragility in the projections, any potential for players being eased in. A couple that we've already dinged to start the season are Jamal Murray, Yusuf Nurkic, Chris Middleton. We're expecting all those guys to be on minutes limit. We're also tracking preseason playing time as well. Like Ben Simmons has not played significant minutes in any preseason game so far, so we dinged his minutes accordingly. It's tough for us to imagine, him going from teens minutes to mid to upper 20s minutes. So
I was going to say you can get lower than zero.
yeah. So it's very challenging. I think we have to also be very mindful of things like back-to-backs, schedule quirks, 3 games and 4 nights, how each coach manages those spots. If they're a guy like Tibbs, is just going to roll out guys 36 plus minutes regardless. If they get in a blowout, how likely are players to be sitting out mid to late fourth quarter? You have certain coaches that'll have their starters in down 16 with 3 minutes left. You have other coaches that'll just go and ride their starters regardless of the score, right? So it's being very cognizant of though all those factors that go into a slate, and like I said, it's different for each team every night. So I think you kind of just have to reset a little bit. Maybe the same way you do after every NFL week, almost, to kind of take stock of what's happened so far, what the factors are going into that specific matchup, that specific game, and then adjust accordingly. So we're doing things a lot in terms of thinking of like fragility and range of outcomes when we're projecting minutes. I think for us, centers, especially backup centers, are a spot that we are very mindful of because a backup center who has really great rates that we project for 20 minutes might pop as one of our biggest edges in our props tool. But that spot has a lot of fragility with the minutes and a lot of wider range of outcomes. Foul trouble, especially for big men, it is an issue. And you go right into the issue where they might play three centers instead of just the two, right? So we're always trying to capture that. It's just every little piece of information. I think we're trying to read tens of thousands of tweets a day. We're combing through all these articles, just trying to glean any sort of like tidbits of information, any tells. And in that also is the experience plays a factor in kind of filtering out what actual be predictive and what matters and what is just kind of coach speak and noise.
When it comes to building player projections, especially for the NBA here, are you finding it that the increased trend in positionless basketball, like let's face it, the positions aren't as defined as they used to be. Is that making it easier or harder when it comes to trying to project out some of these guys here?
It's a bit harder because we are projecting minutes according to position, like internally. We just want to, checks and balances to make sure that we're projecting 48 center minutes and 48 small forward minutes, etc. Ben Simmons is a perfect example of this. We have, like half his minutes at point guard and half his minutes at center, right? So I think you kind of just have to account for that. Like OKC is a perfect example. And, before Hardenstein got hurt today, we were projecting them to start him at center in a bigger lineup against Nikola Jokic, given the matchup on opening night. On other nights, they'll start Alex Caruso instead and go a bit of a smaller look, right? So with the way positionless basketball is impacting things, there's so much, versatility in lineup combinations in the way that minutes can go. Golden State's going to be a big problem for us this year in terms they have so much versatility. They can go really big with Andrew Wiggins at shooting guard, or they can go really small and downsize with Draymond at center, So it provides a bit of a challenge for us to kind of crack that code of what that those lineups will look like on a night-to-night basis. But I think it's also a part of what we're really excited about. Our team is having conversations all the time about where do we think a team will go on a specific night, and that's a big kind of part of our edge is be able to crack that code, figure it out, and be on the edge of like projecting as close to possible of what's actually going to happen.
Now, let's also face it, when it comes to the macro of the NBA, there are games that teams do not care about winning. And there are players who don't care about winning every single game. I mean, we see it especially with how we deal with load management and stars not playing night to night in the league today. This question is really for both of you. Justin, we'll go to you first, but does it how do you get around the fact that we are also, while trying to build these projections, say, well, does this team really care tonight?
Yeah, I mean, effort is something that's very tough to quantify. And,
Yeah.
is there a give a crap, metric that you can bake in your projections? Probably not. I think what we would probably come at it with is more of it impacting their minutes and kind of looking at the range of outcomes. And this is the third game in 4 nights. They're playing a team they're favored against by 12 and a half. Is it likely the starters will play, deep in the fourth quarter if it's a blowout? Probably not. So we'll try to, you know, assess those situations individually and, you know, uh, impact our projections accordingly. If this is a national TV game and the Celtics are playing the Sixers or something, and we know that it's a meaningful game for both sides, we might extend minutes like half a minute or even a full minute in some instances to capture that other side of it as well. So in terms of rates, it's a little hard to ding guys if just thinking maybe they don't care, but we'll control kind of the minutes and account for it that way.
And it's also like you could potentially, if you know that that's the third game, the third game on it, like you said, third game in 4 days, that, well, maybe they don't care about that middle game instead. You're looking ahead on the schedule as well. Rufus,
Sure.
But look, I kind of agree with Justin that I don't think it's that guys are going out there and specifically like dogging it necessarily or like shooting, putting less effort into their shots, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think fatigue could play a big role, which could show up at on the defensive end for sure. And if your legs aren't there, I mean, you could expect like that to impact shooting to some extent as well. But I would think it's more about projecting usage. And I think what Justin said about the range of outcomes there and individual circumstances that aren't really things you can necessarily model, right? Like the marquee
yeah.
game that matters a lot. You know, I think Justin is spot on with that.
Yeah, and I think it also varies from player to player as well. Like I'm gonna be less concerned about Anthony Edwards on the third game in 4 nights because that dude will take a massive fall and go to the locker room and come right back in 3 minutes, right? And be okay. I'm worried about Chris Paul. I'm worried about Chris Middleton. I'm worried about veterans that have a lot of mileage on them. I'm worried about Draymond Green, teams that have depth to other options to play instead of those guys, to keep them a little fresh and not have to wear them out. So I think it's very circumstantial. And I think part of the edge is like understanding all these nuances, player to player, team to team.
Yeah, like we've already seen Joel Embiid has come out and said, I'm not playing back to backs this year. Like he clearly doesn't care about personal statistic awards. He's just out there trying to
So,
win.
so what that makes me, I mean, that's a great example where on the first leg of a back-to-back, I might think he might play a little bit more, right? Because he's going to sit the next game,
Mhm.
just kind of picking up on those little nuances, I think just are really important for projecting NBA.
So when it comes to the actual projections that we're going to be putting out here at Unabated, how is it that we're going to be differing a little bit from what's already out there in the market? Because we are going to be doing some things that are a little bit unique here, and I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is going to be the conditional projections that we're going to put out. And, a lot of the general analysis around player news and player injuries in the NBA is something along the lines of Luka Doncic is questionable. I ran the on-off query, and Kyrie Irving's usage rate goes up 1.5%. Spencer Dinwiddie's assist rate goes up 1%, and this guy's DK points per minute goes up 2.2. There isn't really an exact quantification of what that team's projections would actually look like without Luca. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you the ability to toggle between both scenarios. And, what we want to really focus on and how the NBA has really changed in terms of betting is a couple of years ago, if Luca was ruled out, I would have like a 30-second, 1 minute window to be able to hit sides, hit player props before everything was pulled off the board. Now that window is like 5 to 15 seconds. It's very hard to get down in the immediate window after that news breaks. Like some books are extremely fast in terms of pulling stuff, even within a couple seconds. What we want to start focusing on and shifting our attention to is that pre window where we want to be on top of where that player's availability is trending. So you can get down an hour before, 2 hours before, 3 hours before that player's final status is announced. And part of that is having the preparation to be able to go back and forth and exactly quantify, okay, if this happens, what exactly which player prop has the biggest edge, has the most EV. Instead of, I think generally the approach has been, I'm just going to hit Dinwiddie, I'm going to hit Kyrie PRAs. I'm not really going to know exactly what the edge is, but I'm just kind of guesstimating, ballparking that that's where I want to be, right? Sometimes the markets will already kind of adjust for that upside in a player's projection, and there might not be as big of an edge there as you think. So instead of in that situation, kind of more generally blindly betting Kyrie and Dinwiddie, maybe the edge is on Clay. Maybe the edge on Derek Lively the second, will give you the opportunity to know exactly how many points, assists, rebounds, steals, and blocks each of his teammates will benefit in that situation. So we want to just, how I talked about how news has changed, that window has shrunk. That window has evaporated for you to really take advantage of right after news breaks. We want to shift our focus more towards the build and the lead in before. So this is another big tool that gets you really prepared for when that news does drop, or even get out ahead of it and get down before it does. So that's one of our biggest focuses with the projections. We're going to pick 2 to 6 key situations every day and give you the power, give you the tools to make the best decisions.
I
It's
have a question along those lines, Justin. Are there opportunities, like, are books pricing in the range of the, I guess, the uncertainty
Yeah.
in terms of alt lines? So this guy's usage could be in a bunch of different places because we don't know about whether this other player is going to be playing or not.
Mhm.
You know, clearly, and there's going to be more value on an alt, or I guess I don't want to say more value, but the tails are more likely than relative to
Sure.
sort of a projection that is going to, like, 50, let's say 50% one thing, 50% the other.
Yeah. No, I think your head is in the right space, because I think a lot of the attention kind of goes to the main player projections, and the alts probably have a lot more edge. I think that's something we definitely want to kind of be looking at, like incorporating in our tools a little bit. And I would imagine that that's probably even bigger of an edge than the main player prop markets.
That's very interesting. Now when it comes to trying to really ascertain your edge in these markets, because what you've been talking about here is basically the conventional wisdom is, oh, I'm leaning towards this guy being out. I'm going to hit these particular numbers because I think there might be an edge there. And what we're going to be able to do is say, hey, you can actually run the numbers for the scenario that this guy is out. And oh, it turns out that the real edge is actually on these guys over here instead of the guys that you were looking at there. But when it comes to the uncertainty that we have inherently with the NBA here, what do you guys think in terms of balancing betting into the uncertainty, like you said, betting a couple hours early versus waiting for some of this news to come out?
I embrace it. I
Mhm.
think if you're betting the NBA, you need to be on top of news and information because it is
Yeah.
everything. That like every slate is completely different. There's, I mean, if books were not offering sides and props for games and teams with injuries, half the board would be offline. You
Yeah.
know, there's so much that impacts a slate, and being able to not only keep up with it, but be able to be on the edge of like projecting and predicting what's happening is massive. So, I've made, I don't claim to be the level of sports better that Rufus is or Jack, is. I stick to what I know. And for me, I've had a lot of success betting NBA based on news and information and being able to get good, solid reads ahead of time before the market moves. I think that still is the edge with the NBA because trying to beat it straight up is just very difficult, and you're trying to maximize any type of edge that you got. And for me, like I've mentioned, books have gotten very good at negating that window right after the news breaks, that edge, right? So we're shifting more of our focus to the pregame edge, the pre-lock, news lock edge. And I think there's still a lot of advantage to be had there. Um, I think in terms of just my experience having a decade like looking at news, it is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's very doable to be able to come in with each of these news items and even in the morning to late morning, early afternoon to get a good handle on where a player is in terms of their likelihood of playing. And that's something that we're going to be adding and bringing to the product is a percent play that's updated to the minute throughout the day for every one of these key players. So we'll be setting alerts out that Luca, maybe starts the day at 55%, but we get a bad report from him from shoot around and he gets downgraded to 35%, Um,
Yeah,
Obviously,
we're quantifying out the likelihood of a questionable.
exactly. And because all questionables obviously aren't created equal.
Yeah.
And, sure, there's, you know, a 35% chance we're wrong, but there's 65% chance we're right. I think, for you as a bettor, it's important to kind of take all those range of outcomes and probabilities in your head and obviously apply that and figure out, what does kind of pass that barrier as something you feel comfortable betting on. But I do feel like I feel strong that that is still a significant edge that is a bit. Um, the market just doesn't have the tools out there that exactly kind of quantify that for you, and that's what we're trying to do.
Could you imagine if we had the NBA load management era that we've got today in like the 90s when news did not travel anywhere near as fast? Could you imagine trying to play the sport, trying to bet it and just be like, "Oh, Jordan's out tonight, cool." And you
Yeah,
find
you're
out at
just
game time.
like you're turning on the
Yeah.
game. You're like, why is yeah, why is Jordan out of the lineup tonight? But yeah, it would have been pretty crazy. Now we have you know Facebook, IG, Twitter, all that type of stuff. I remember a couple years ago we broke a bit of Danilo Gallinari news. There was a Facebook post in Italian that we had to translate, and that's how we ended up getting the Gallo news that night.
That is why I had something like that with when Messi came to MLS. It broke in
Yeah.
Argentinian news a day before it did here. And unfortunately, of course, they didn't win the cup, but I was loaded up on 150 to 1, 200 to 1
Yeah,
Miami futures. I'll tell you that much. But
love it.
when it comes to when it comes to the player-based modeling, Rufus, you talked about this last year that a player-based model would probably be the strongest approach for modeling. Is this the start of that player-based model? Because if we can quantify the value of a player to sides and totals, all of a sudden we're right back in your domain here that we talked about a little earlier.
Oh, I mean, I think, everything Justin does is player based, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
but my,
So,
my point is using that, like taking that from the player prop side to the sides and totals markets and to the derivatives there.
yeah, I mean, I think projecting like props isn't always exactly the same as projecting value to a team
Mhm.
because I mean, you care more about the stats than
Yeah.
the impact. I mean, right? I mean, the things that a player is doing that are not filling up a stat sheet, like the Shane Battiers of the world, who didn't fill up a stat sheet but had a ton of value. But I do think it's broadly speaking, I think the same approach. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that that is certainly useful in terms of building out team ratings are the sum of the player ratings for that given day, given usage, all that stuff, and to build it, yes, into a team level projection.
Now,
I don't think it's easy, but
yeah. Now, Justin, we've already talked a little bit about, a guy being 65% questionable versus 35% questionable. Is this something that the books simply don't have the capacity to really defend against right now, and it's what's providing us a little bit more of an edge here?
I would argue that it's a large part of their job to be able to define that and get a handle on what's happening. I think part of the tension is that load management and a team's opinion of when to be resting players has changed significantly over the last couple of years. Team training staffs, medical staffs have significant input now on whether a team ends up holding out a player. You'll hear a lot of times that Steph Curry will come out and say, I wanted to play this game, but our medical team thought it would be smart to hold me out in this situation. And it's on books, it's on us, it's on bettors to kind of get a handle on that and just kind of figure out how things are trending and adapt to the new landscape of load management and all that. For me, when people are coming out and complaining about teams don't care anymore or this guy randomly rested on that night, I think you need to come at it with a different viewpoint where, okay, I need to go solve this and try to backtrack it and figure out why this happened rather than complain about the outcome because it's been a couple of years now where we've seen this, and if you're not able to kind of adapt and you know project at least a majority of these situations, I think it probably speaks more to you than what's happening. So for us, there are obviously situations where we get a random player scratched, especially if they kind of tweet something in pregame warmups. But we come into every slate with a list of teams and players that are on rest watch, that are on watch to cut their players' minutes in a certain situation that we talked about earlier may not be meaningful in terms of their standings, may not be advantageous to extend them in a 3 games and 4 night situation. We're trying to be on top of that stuff as much as possible. So I think when we kind of address this, the onus should be on you to figure it out more than anything. And I think it is to a large part solvable. And instead of like you see as a player randomly getting rested, what you should be doing in that situation is like putting that situation as a Rolodex in your mind for the future rather than complaining about how unfair it is now. So I understand. I think for me the biggest issue is more the experience for the better and the average better. Just putting in a side bet or a prop bet and a random piece of news kind of destroying a lot of their EV.
Yeah.
But I do think like that's the whole point of what we're trying to create here is to give you tools, products, news, information from the unabated and to have you avoid those situations as much as possible, right? So we're going to be doing a live show at least a couple times a week, and we'll talk through every one of these situations with like potential landmines, right? Where, okay, we're not projecting this guy is going to sit tonight, but I want you to be aware that there's a possibility his minutes might get slashed, because of this reason or this reason, right? So that's what we're going to be trying to do is like absorb as much of this news and data and information as possible and bake them into like our range of outcomes when doing our projections.
And let's face it, like load management, players suddenly being out, it's terrible for the fan experience, but from a betting experience, it's creating uncertainty, and it's creating uncertainty that, like you said, is solvable. It's probably better for us, right?
No, for sure. I
Yeah.
think if you're an unabated member, I think the slates that you have the most edge on are like 10 game slates with 15 injuries.
Yeah.
Like the more injuries there are, the more opportunities there are to like increase your edge. Like the worst slates for me would be like 3 game slates with no news. Like
Yeah.
you're just having to beat the book straight up. There's no real angle there. It's a lot more difficult. I'm excited. It's a lot more work for our team, obviously, when we have those like 12 game slates with 15 injuries. But those are the money making slates, for me in the past, where you can get reads on all these situations and make informed decisions and bets based on them.
Now, let's talk about the team that you've put together here before we head out, because, like you said, you guys are going to be doing a live show a couple days a week where people are going to get a peek into our quote unquote trading room of you guys talking about how you're going to build the projections, who you're looking at tonight. But who is going to be in that quote unquote room with you?
Yeah, it's going to be three of us, myself, Stephen Byron Keach. He worked a decade plus at Rotogrinders, ran their NBA projections. Really excited to have him. And then John Radaba, who I've worked with extensively at Underdog, and he's been, a big part of our WNBA projections as well.
Mhm.
Super, super pumped to have him on too. So I think we all bring a lot of experience collectively and have different strengths. I think my strength especially has been on the news end. SBK has been on the projections and the minutes end specifically, and John's going to be kind of in charge of our rates for our projections too. So just between Fantasy Labs, Underdog, Roto Grinders, ETR, we have a lot of industry experience and knowledge within our team. And, our goal is, obviously we recognize that it's going to take a little bit to fully build this thing out. We just kind of built this thing in a couple months, but our long-term ambition is to be best in market and settle for nothing less.
And of course, if people want to take advantage of that, this is the best time of year to become an unabated member here, because this is when the odd screen is going to be lighting up all day, every day. We've got basketball, we got football, we even have a little bit of baseball coming in. And of course, we still have hockey going strong too. And if you want to get access to all of the fantastic work that Justin and his team are going to be doing, we have a whole bunch of options for you. You can choose between, first off, having a premium membership, or if you want, we've got the projection kit for $59 a week, $199 a month, or you could pay $998 a year, which is really like $125 a month when you factor in, there's a couple months that the season's not going on. And on top of all that, it comes with a Props Plus membership, so you will be able to get access to all of our fantastic props tools for the rest of the year, season, however long you want to be a member, and you can use those for all sorts of stuff like football. I know our college football team has been doing a fantastic job uh, over there with their college football prop projections we do. And of course, for NFL, checking on Fridays. Derek Carty and I from Derek from EV Analytics and I do a nice little prop show for you Fridays at noon Pacific time as well to talk about the NFL slate. But for now, Justin, Rufus, thank you guys so much for being here with me today. So excited for this NBA season and everything else here. Really thrilled to have you with us, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you a little bit more. You got to come back out to Vegas, Justin.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, you know the drill. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to head over to unabated.com. And if you use unabated.com/demo, you can go and you can sign up for a one-on-one walkthrough, most likely with me on a Zoom call. I'll show you how everything works, how all of the tools work to help you become a better. But for now, that's going to do it for us. Best of luck. And as always, let's cash some tickets. We'll see you next week, everybody.